As a freeman, my family, through the generations, goes back to medieval times.
There was bull baiting upon the bull ring. You had the famous stone where the bull would be tied to.
Bowmen of Llantrisant were renowned as being excellent archers.
Beating of the bounds. It happens every 7 years. This year we expect probably 10,000 people to join us in that ceremony.
There's a huge history to be told, and it's an incredibly quirky and fascinating one as well.
Llantrisant is an ancient hilltop town with a history that spans millennia. Its name was dedicated in the 7th century to 3 Welsh saints, Illtyd, Gwynno and Tyfodwg. But it wasn't until 1246 that the town was mentioned in the history books, after local ruler Richard de Clare fortified its castle. It would later be used as an overnight prison for King Edward II. One of the most iconic and historic buildings in Llantrisant is the 14th century Guildhall. Perched on the highest point of the town and overlooking the marketplace and weighing house, or poisty. The Guildhall has been a school, a jail and a corn market, but most importantly, the seat of power and authority of a group of people for over 650 years. Their epic tale begins in the 14th century, when Llantrisant was given a charter, a status that gave special privileges to its most prominent traders, rulers and landowners. This special tradition continues to endure and flourish to this day. These people became known as the Freemen. Many of today's freemen trace their ancestry to freemen living in the town in the 17th and 18th centuries, with some believing they descend from the original 14th century freemen. The most famous freeman is Sir David Evans, who became the Lord Mayor of London in 1891. Dean Powell is a freeman who has lived in the town all his life. He has come to Cardiff to view the charter that enshrined the rights of the freemen hundreds of years ago for the very first time.
I think I'm going to feel quite emotional when I see the charter for the first time, because it's such an incredibly important document to the history of Llantrisant. And we're looking at a parchment here that, I say, was dated October 1424.
Know that we of special grace have granted and by this our present charter, confirmed to our beloved burgesses of our town of Llantrisant, that they and their successors should be free throughout our entire domain.
The fact that Llantrisant was now a free borough, a corporation town, so the freemen could trade without paying taxes, without paying tolls within their town. And of course anyone who came in there with the markets and the fairs, the merchants who would come, they would have to pay for the privilege. To be honest with you, it was a prize really eagerly sought, was to become a freeman. So originally you would have had the opportunity to become a freeman if you were the son of a freeman, the son-in-law of a freeman, or if you were an apprentice to a freeman. And for that matter, of course, it was given to honorary titles as well. Every members of the clergy in Llantrisant became a freeman, the local high sheriff would, the local MP.
Being a freeman gives you roots here. It's proof, if you like, that you, your family, your relatives truly belong here in this land.
Today, the most important privilege inherited from Llantrisant's original freemen is the land that was owned and managed by them.
The common is still owned by the freemen of Llantrisant. They still manage it, we still look after it, we still graze our cattle on it. Their reason, their justification of being freemen is still just as important as it was in this document, and that's to protect the land and the rights of their forefathers.
It's a big big deal to be a freeman, I believe, of Llantrisant, and you know, that's been passed down in my bloodline and things.
I'm proud to have stuff on here, and I'm proud to be a freeman. Well, I know it's gone back 5 generations with us on the common.
One thing the Charter does quite clearly is marks out the boundary of the free borough of Llantrisant. It's a 7-mile boundary if you were to walk it on foot.
Every 7 years, thousands of people from all over the world come to Llantrisant to walk in a ceremony called Beating the Bounds.
It's an old ceremony, an ancient ceremony, whereby the freemen and people of the town go around the boundary of the land which is held in common.
The first stop we make is in the local village of Crossin, which is where one of the boundary stones can be found, and we carry out a tradition of bouncing a freeman's son on one of the boundary stones.
And the idea is that young people in the town learn the boundaries of the common land where people can graze their animals.
You can be a part of it, and everyone obviously gets together on that town, whether you're freeman or not. It's actually a massive thing for a lot of residents in Llantrisant.
I done it 7 years ago. I went to Crossin on a Zimmer because I'd had a bump on a horse and I couldn't go no further. So I got drunk in the Crossin pub.
The town's very first charter was issued in 1346. 3 months before the Battle of Crecy, a famous battle in the 100 Years' War between England and France. It's suspected there was an ulterior motive in its awarding by Hugh Despencer, the ruler of Glamorgan at the time.
So was it a case that Hugh Despencer wanted to win favour with the men of Llantrisant, who were experienced and trained longbowmen, to join their army, and did so by presenting them with a charter? The use of the longbow at the Battle of Crecy would change warfare forever.
Llantrisant's longbowmen fought for the Black Prince Edward of Woodstock, and the people of the town have been known as the Black Army ever since.
Bowmen of Llantrisant were renowned as being excellent archers. They were very strong, very tough, and could shoot these very heavy draw-weight bows, shooting very heavy arrows with armour-piercing bodkins on the end, shooting them hundreds of yards to reach the enemy. They were probably quite competitive, so they've tried to beat each other at distance shooting, how fast they could shoot. Because it's said that some archers could shoot 12 arrows in a minute. They could get the second arrow in the air before the first arrow had actually landed. Tests have been done that as the arrows go up, they get to the top, slow down, but then as they come down again, they continue accelerating and then actually hit the ground with the same amount of speed that they actually left the bow with. The men of Llantrisant would certainly have used a bow very, very similar to this. It's an extremely powerful weapon.
During Beating the Bounds, the freemen have always carried a unique object that tells the story of Britain during the English Civil War of the 1640s, a tumultuous, divisive period of British history. There is a freeman with a particular interest in this precious object.
A piece of real history, the ceremonial mace of Llantrisant town. Originally, maces were weapons of war to bludgeon people. In Norman times, the bodyguards of the king, who were closest to the king, the sergeants at arms, carried maces as their favoured weapon. And over time, the mace came to be regarded as associated with royal authority. And it changed from being an instrument of war to a ceremonial instrument representing royal power. A mace with a royal coat of arms would have been normally destroyed by the parliamentarians, and Parliament dictated that all royal maces were to be replaced by republican maces. So this mace is a rarity, a pre-Civil War mace, but this also has the coat of arms of the Earl of Pembroke, Philip Herbert, who was an extremely wealthy man, Having been a favourite of the king in court, he became an enemy of the king, and later, when Charles was captured and before his execution, the Earl of Pembroke was the jailer of the king. When the parliamentarians won the Civil War, they destroyed all the royal maces, including the royal mace in the House of Parliament. So this mace I hold is older than the mace in the Houses of Parliament today. It's absolutely unique.
Down the centuries, Llantrisant's charter has influenced who owned the town's businesses. Indeed, one of the stipulations of the charter was that only the freemen were allowed to own the pubs.
None but freemen shall keep a stall, shop or tavern. They shall be free to trade with their merchandise and goods within the Lord's domain, free from the tolls and other dues.
It's a tradition that endured into the 17th and 18th centuries in a town with 27 pubs and a reputation for drunkenness and prostitution, as well as a penchant for a particularly gory pastime.
There was bull baiting upon the bull ring. You had the famous stone where the bull would be tied to, and then the farmers would bring their terriers, and the terrier that held onto the bull's tongue the longest would be the winner. I think the bull baiting was pretty nasty and pretty cruel, and it tickles me though that they actually banned it, not because it was cruel to animals, but because it encouraged unruly crowds to the area. Well, it was known as a mean and dirty little town, but I don't think that's fair to say that now in this day and age. It's a lovely town. It's one of the friendliest places you can come to. It's not as wild, which I think is a shame.
Llantrisant has always been a town with larger-than-life characters. The largest was no doubt Dr. William Price.
Well, this is Dr. William Price, the very famous Welsh surgeon, chartist, pioneer of a social healthcare system, archdruid of Wales, and the man who was a founding father, really, of modern-day cremation in Britain. Well, when Dr. William Price was 83 years of age, on his 83rd birthday actually, he rather controversially married in some kind of pagan druidic ceremony in Pontypridd with a woman who was almost 60 years his junior. And just a few months later, she gave birth to a son. In just 5 months, sadly, it died. And he made the decision to cremate the boy's body on East Calan Hill, which is just above the town here. And eventually he stood trial at the Glamorganshire Assizes in Cardiff, facing the charge of causing a public nuisance by holding an open-air cremation. It was a huge court case at the time. He defended himself brilliantly and beat the system by winning and finding himself not guilty. The power of that court case, of course, led the Cremation Society of Great Britain to get the Act passed through Parliament by 1902. And he's just remembered as one of the most remarkable men in Welsh history.
Through the ages, the freemen fought to stop developments on their prized possession, the common. Coal owners tried to sink a pit in the 19th century, and there were plans for an open cast mine in the 20th century. In the 1920s, there was an attempt to set up an organised golf course on the common. Many of the freemen and their families were vehemently opposed to the idea and adopted some unconventional methods to jeopardise the planned golf course.
The freemen actually broke the flags, they threw the flagpoles into the duck pond. They had the young boys, obviously the sons of the freemen, would hide behind bushes, run out to steal the balls. Well, in the end, it came down to they set up a local club down in Talbot Green, and the freemen got their land back. In a way, I am glad that things like that never happened, and a course was never fully commissioned to play here, because what we have been left with, lucky enough, I still live in Llantrisant. It's a beautiful bit of land and it is quite busy. There's lots of animals. It's a nice place to go and relax.
I was like to come back every 7 years and beat the bounds.
After 7 years of waiting and over 2 years in the planning, the big day has finally arrived. Locals, visitors, tourists and freemen from all over the world fill the streets of Llantrisant's old town to bursting.
We've done it every year for the last 7 or 8 times.
I walk every 7 years. I've lived in Llantrisant for the past 17 years.
The crowd beat a path along the historic 7-mile boundary, paying homage to Llantrisant's forefathers, who walked the same route almost 750 years ago.
To see the amount of people that actually turned up in Llantrisant a day was quite phenomenal, so I think we can safely sit back and celebrate our heritage and celebrate what was a really great day in the history of this town.
Though now there are several thousand freemen, which certainly weren't back in the 14th century, their reason, their justification for being freemen is still just as important as it was in this document, and that's to protect the land and the rights of their forefathers.
Not every town can say they've got the pleasure of being part of and having a tradition that's been passed down that they can continue on to their future generations.
I'm proud to be a freeman. Why would we ever want to let it go?